In these days, as we lead up to the festival of Chanukkah, I wanted to share just a few thoughts that I had about Chanukkah this year. And I want to begin with a conversation that I had last night with some of our candidates for conversion. And I told the stories of Chanukkah. One of the stories that we tell is repeated for us by most people who observe Chanukkah, which is the story of the oil, that after defeating the Syrian Greeks, Judah and the Maccabees cleansed the temple, and when they went to light the lights in the temple, they had only enough oil for one day, but the oil lasted for 8 days, hence the 8-day miracle of Chanukkah. There is another story that we tell, which is found in our Sidurim. It's interesting that the miracle of the oil is not mentioned in the prayers that we recite on Chanukkah. Instead, we read of how on Chanukkah the few defeated the many, those considered weak defeated those who were strong, and the righteous triumphed over those who were not righteous. And the question which I discussed last night and which I would raise with you is, why are there these two stories? Which one is the story of Chanukkah? And after thinking about it, it occurs to me that each is the story of Chanukkah. Each tells a different narrative, narratives that are important not so much in understanding what happened in times of old, but rather narratives that help us today. Today, in Israel, as an example, it is the story of the few over the many that really resonates. When you go to Israel and celebrate Hanukkah, that is the primary emphasis, because after all, the story of the Maccabees, the few against the many, is the story of the people of Israel today, the military of Israel against the larger world that seeks to destroy Israel. The other narrative has always, I think, resonated more in the diaspora. The story of the 8 days, the story of the oil, is one which discusses the notion of light in darkness, of hope when there may not be hope that's evidence, that one candle can illuminate so much, and that even that small amount representing our hope is enough to get us through the darkest moments. That's been historically a Jewish narrative that has, I think, been incorporated into the story of Hanukkah, so that those who are suffering feel in darkness that they have the source of hope and light that comes from belief in God and comes from their own Jewish identity. In closing, I would like to, in particular, go back to Israel to say that this year, perhaps more than others, the story of the oil seems particularly applicable to what's going on in Israel. There is a sense of concern. I don't know if it's gotten to a degree of despair, but certainly great concern in Israel about what lies in the future. The future, I think, is one which will occur with Israel strong and Israel secure, but I don't know when that future is going to take shape. And in the meantime, it is the hope of Hanukkah, the miracle of the 8 days, the sense that even in dark times for Israel, the narrative of the candles on Hanukkah becomes more applicable than perhaps at other times. Whatever the origin of these two stories, I think that stories that we tell are often intended not to illuminate the past, but rather to provide some direction for the future. And so for this year, I hope that Hanukkah will again be a celebration of the few over the many, and those who are not as strong, who can triumph over those who are seemingly much stronger. But I also hope that this Hanukkah, there will be light and hope, not only for us as Jews here, but for the people of Israel as well. Happy Hanukkah. Have a wonderful holiday.